Welcome, dear listener, to another gentle journey into the folds of history. Tonight, close your eyes for a second and picture this. It's the early 1500s, and the world is changing faster than a teenager discovering coffee for the first time. Spain, once just another European kingdom dealing with its own messy politics, is now on the fast track to becoming a global powerhouse. Why? Because some brave, and sometimes very reckless, explorers set sail, bumped into continents they didn't even know were there, and came back with stories of gold, spices, and treasures that made everyone's jaws drop. This is the world our merchant lives in, a world buzzing with excitement, opportunity, and let's be honest, a lot of risk. Merchants weren't just shopkeepers. They were the engines of Spain's golden age. They were the people connecting Spain to distant shores, bringing back goods from faraway lands, and in the process, fueling dreams of riches and adventure. Now, our story is about just one day in the life of a 16th century Spanish merchant. Just one. But that's enough, because even a single day tells us so much about the bigger picture. The daily grind, the big wins, the small frustrations, and the hopes for tomorrow. Before we meet him at his breakfast table, though, we need to step back and soak in the setting. Spain in the 16th century was like that friend who suddenly got rich and started showing up everywhere with fancy clothes and expensive hobbies. After Columbus's voyages in 1492, Spain became the gatekeeper of the New World's wealth. Silver poured in from Mexico and Peru. Exotic goods like cacao, tobacco, and spices made their way onto Spanish tables. And don't forget wool and wine, Spain's own exports, highly prized across Europe. But it wasn't all glitter and glory. With wealth came problems, pirates circling the seas, endless wars to fight in Europe, taxes that seemed to multiply like rabbits, and an economy that sometimes felt like a shaky Jenga tower. Still, merchants had plenty of reason to dream big. If you played your cards right, you could go from a modest trader to a wealthy gentleman with influence, connections, and maybe even a seat at the king's table. Let's meet the star of our story. His name, well, we'll call him Diego Fernandez. A nice, solid name for a respectable Spanish merchant. He's in his mid-40s. Not old, but not exactly fresh out of apprenticehood either. By now, Diego has seen it all. Storms at sea that nearly sank his cargo, a deal gone bad that taught him to always read the fine print. And yes, a few glorious victories, where ships returned loaded with silver or spices, making him a small fortune. Diego lives in Seville, the beating heart of Spain's trade empire. If Madrid was the political capital, Seville was the economic engine. Thanks to its access to the Guadalquivir River and its monopoly on trade with the Americas, Seville was basically the Wall Street of the 16th century, but with more donkey carts and fewer bankers in suits. Diego isn't one of the richest merchants in town. Not yet, but he's doing well. He owns a decent house near the bustling market square. He employs a couple of apprentices to help with bookkeeping, and his name is known among the dock workers and ship captains. That's already a big deal in this world. Seville itself is a sight to behold. Narrow cobblestone streets twist and turn like a maze, lined with whitewashed houses, iron balconies, and the smell of fresh bread baking in clay ovens. From the docks, the salty scent of the sea mixes with the sharp tang of spices and the slightly less pleasant odor of fish that's been sitting out a little too long. Merchants like Diego thrive here because Seville is alive with trade. Ships arrive loaded with silver bars from Peru, indigo dye from Guatemala, and strange new foods Europeans are still figuring out, like tomatoes, which people at first thought were poisonous. Local markets overflow with Spanish olive oil, wine, and wool ready to be shipped abroad. And everywhere you hear voices, traders haggling, sailors shouting, priests preaching, children running underfoot. Now let's pause for a second. You might be wondering, What exactly did merchants do all day? Weren't they just buying and selling stuff? Well, yes and no. Merchants were more like today's entrepreneurs. They invested in ships, gambled on risky voyages, tracked their profits in ledgers, and networked constantly to stay ahead of the competition. Imagine this. A merchant might fund a voyage to the Americas, knowing full well that the ship could sink, pirates could attack, or disease could wipe out half the crew. But if the ship came back safely with silver, spices, or sugar, boom, instant jackpot. That was the game merchants played every day. High risk, high reward. Our friend Diego lives right in the middle of the storm. His wealth depends not only on his business smarts, but also on luck, weather, politics, and sometimes even whether the king decides to raise taxes again. Every day, he wakes up knowing that his fortune could rise or fall with the tide, because history can feel like a giant textbook sometimes. Dates, kings, battles, treaties. But the truth is, history is lived day by day, hour by hour by people like Diego. By following him through one ordinary day, we see the texture of life in the 16th century Spain, what people ate, what they feared, what they dreamed about. It's the little details that make history real. The scratch of quill pens on parchment ledgers, the creak of wooden ships at anchor, the taste of bread dipped in olive oil at breakfast, the nervous glances as a storm rolls in, threatening a cargo worth a small fortune. This isn't just the story of Diego. It's the story of thousands of merchants who built Spain's empire with their courage, their greed, their cleverness, and sometimes their mistakes. So as the sun rises over Seville, casting golden light on the river and the ships bobbing gently at the docks, Diego Fernandez stretches, yawns, and prepares for another day. He doesn't know what the day will bring: fortune, frustration, or maybe just a long afternoon of paperwork. But he knows this much. In a world that's changing by the hour, every day counts. And that's where we'll start our journey, not with kings and explorers, but with one merchant waking up to face another day in the golden age of Spain. The roosters of Seville don't care about merchant schedules. Long before the sun peeks over the tiled rooftops, they're already crowing like they've just discovered opera. Our merchant, Diego Fernandez, stirs under the heavy wool blanket that keeps him warm through the night. His house isn't freezing. Seville has a relatively mild climate, but stone walls hold on to a nighttime chill that makes crawling out of bed a test of willpower. It's early morning, and Diego is about to start his day. But before he even puts his feet on the cool floor, let's take a look around his home, his family, and what morning meant in the life of a 16th century Spanish merchant. Diego's house is not a palace, but it's far from humble. Picture a two-story building tucked along a narrow cobbled street near Seville's bustling market district. The walls are whitewashed, and inside there's a central courtyard with a small fountain. The courtyard isn't just for beauty, it helps keep the house cool in summer. Upstairs are bedrooms, plain but functional. Beds are sturdy wooden frames with mattresses stuffed with wool or straw. Heavy blankets ward off the chill, and pillows are more practical than plush. No silk sheets here. Diego might be comfortable, but he's not drowning in luxury. The downstairs rooms are where life happens. There's a kitchen with clay ovens, a small storeroom stacked with barrels of olive oil and wine, and a study with Diego's most important tools: ledgers, quills, and ink pots. If you were to flip through his ledgers, you'd see neat columns of numbers: debts owed, cargo expected, profits calculated down to the last maravedi. This study is the heart of Diego's workday, but for now, it's quiet. Diego's household includes his wife, Isabel, who runs domestic affairs with quiet efficiency. Merchants' wives played an underrated role in business. When their husbands were away or tied up in endless meetings, wives often managed finances, handled apprentices, and kept trade running smoothly. Isabel knows the business almost as well as Diego, though she rarely gets credit for it. They have 3 children: a teenage son, Juan, who's being groomed to one day take over the family trade, and two younger daughters who are more interested in dolls and gossip than cargo shipments from the New World. There are also a couple of household servants, plus one apprentice, a boy of about 15, who lives with them, working long hours in exchange for training in the merchant's trade. So how does Diego start his morning? No alarm clocks, no buzzing phones, no email inbox to check. Lucky him. Instead, the day is structured by the natural rhythm of sunlight and church bells. The bells of Seville's grand cathedral, La Giralda, ring out across the city, calling both the pious and the practical to begin their day. Diego rises, crosses himself in a quick prayer. Faith is as woven into daily life as bread and wine, and stretches the stiffness from his shoulders. He pulls on a linen shirt, woolen hose, and a doublet, the standard middle-class attire. His clothes are sturdy, not extravagant. Merchants liked to look respectable, but flaunting too much wealth could draw unwanted attention from both rivals and tax collectors. While Isabel oversees the kitchen, Diego's first stop might be the courtyard, where he splashes his face with cool water from the fountain. Soap, as we know it, wasn't used every day. Frankly, hygiene standards were different, but washing the face and hands was a basic ritual. Breakfast is simple. Forget about bacon, eggs, and pancakes. A typical Spanish breakfast in the 1500s was light. A hunk of bread, maybe dipped in olive oil, sometimes with cheese, and washed down with watered wine or warm milk. If he's lucky, perhaps a slice of cured ham. Coffee hasn't arrived in Spain yet. It's still making its way from the Ottoman world, so Diego doesn't have that morning pick-me-up we take for granted. Imagine running a business empire without caffeine. Truly heroic. At the table, the family eats together, though Diego's mind is already on the day's tasks. He chews his bread, while Isabel reminds him of household concerns. The girls need new shoes, a servant broke a clay jug, and the apprentice has been slacking on his chores. Meanwhile, Juan peppers his father with questions about when he can finally join him at the docks. Diego half listens, half dreams about the ship rumored to be arriving today from the Caribbean. In our modern world, people check their phones first thing in the morning. For Diego, the news feed is more old school. Gossip, letters, and rumors carried by word of mouth. Breakfast conversations often drift to what ships have been spotted off the coast, whether the crown plans new taxes or what distant markets are demanding this season. Sometimes, neighbors stop by to exchange news. Merchants lived in tightly knit districts, and information was power. If someone whispered that pirates had been seen off the coast of Portugal, or that the crown was considering raising tariffs on wool exports, you could bet Diego's day would take a sharp turn. After breakfast, Diego retreats to his study for a short while. This is where he checks his accounts, flips through letters from business partners, and reviews contracts. His desk is piled high with parchment. Ink stains his fingers, a badge of his profession. Every entry in his ledger is more than just numbers. It represents risk, trust, and months of waiting. One page notes the cargo he invested in a voyage to Veracruz: cacao beans, indigo dye, and a small shipment of sugar. Another lists debts owed to him by fellow merchants, men who always seem to take longer to pay than they do to borrow. Bookkeeping may not sound glamorous, but it's the lifeline of his trade. Isabel occasionally joins him, offering suggestions or pointing out where an account doesn't add up. Their partnership is quiet but strong. Diego knows that without her, half the household would fall apart. By mid-morning, the sun has risen high enough to fill the courtyard with warm light. Diego pulls on a cloak, adjusts his hat, and prepares to step out into the lively streets of Seville. He carries with him not just his coin pouch, but also the weight of his responsibilities. A family to provide for, apprentices to train, ships to invest in, and a reputation to maintain. The city outside awaits, noisy, colorful, and unpredictable. But before we follow him out the door, take a moment to picture him there in his courtyard, a man caught between the comfort of home and the chaos of commerce. pausing to take a deep breath before plunging into the day. And so, Diego's morning begins, not with fireworks, but with bread, family chatter, a splash of water, and a mind already racing ahead to the docks and the marketplace. Tomorrow's fortunes are built on today's routines, and Diego knows that every decision he makes, even before noon, could shape his family's future. When Diego Fernandez finally steps out of his courtyard and onto the cobbled street, Seville greets him with a symphony of sound, color, and smell. It's mid-morning, the sun is bright, and the city is wide awake. If his home was quiet, orderly, and contained, the world outside is anything but. This is Seville in its prime, the crown jewel of Spain's overseas empire, the beating heart of global trade. To walk its streets is to walk through the crossroads of the world. Ships unload treasures from the Americas. Foreign traders haggle in the market. Priests preach in the plazas. And somewhere in the distance, the cathedral bells remind everyone that no matter how much money flows in, God is still supposed to come. The streets are narrow, winding like a labyrinth. Their stones worn smooth from centuries of feet, hooves, and wagon wheels. The houses lean toward each other, their balconies draped with laundry and flowers, giving the impression that the buildings themselves are gossiping overhead. Vendors shout to advertise their goods, fishmongers with their morning catch, bakers with fresh loaves, still warm from the oven, spice sellers showing off cinnamon and pepper, imported through Lisbon. The air is a cocktail of smells: roasted chestnuts, horse manure, salty air drifting from the river, and the sharp tang of vinegar used to pickle olives. Not exactly the kind of fragrance you'd bottle, but it's home. Diego knows these streets like the lines on his palm. Every turn is familiar, every shout recognizable, yet the city never feels old to him. There's always something new, an exotic product from across the ocean, a rumor about a ship delayed by storms, or a fresh tax decree nailed to a church door. For a merchant like Diego, the docks are where everything happens. Seville owes its booming economy to the Guadalquivir River, which snakes inland from the Atlantic. The river allows ships to sail straight into the city, bringing cargo directly from the New World. As Diego approaches the riverside, the scene bursts into organized chaos. Ships with tall masts who creak against the docks, their sails furled and their decks piled with barrels and crates. Dockworkers shout as they unload cargo. Silver bars packed into wooden chests, sacks of cacao beans, barrels of sugar sticky from leaks, and bundles of exotic hides. Sailors swarm off ships, eager for solid ground after months at sea. Some look exhausted, others rowdy. Street vendors are already there, ready to sell them food, cheap wine, and maybe less wholesome entertainments. The chatter mixes Spanish with Portuguese, Italian, Flemish, and even a little Arabic. Seville is not just Spanish, it's international. Near the docks looms the Casa de Contratación, or House of Trade. This building is the nerve center of Spain's overseas empire. Every ship sailing to or from the Americas must register here. Officials track cargo, collect taxes, and make sure the crown gets its share of the profits. Think of it as part customs office, part bank, part government watchdog. For merchants like Diego, the Casa is both a blessing and a headache. On one hand, it makes trade possible, offering rules and protections. On the other, it's a bureaucratic maze full of officials demanding paperwork, signatures, and, most importantly, taxes. The crown always takes its cut, always. Diego knows that before the day is done, he'll probably have to step inside, shuffle some papers, and maybe slip a clerk a little gift to make sure things move along quickly. Seville's merchants don't operate as lone wolves. They organize into guilds, professional associations that regulate trade, set standards, and protect members' interests. Guild meetings can be tense affairs, full of debates about pricing, imports, and competition, but they're essential. Diego belongs to one such guild. It gives him a network of allies who share information and sometimes pool resources for big ventures. But it also means politics, alliances, rivalries, and the occasional heated argument. In Seville, being a merchant isn't just about selling goods. It's about navigating a web of relationships, favors, and obligations. If the docks are the supply line, the marketplace is where goods change hands. Diego heads to the Plaza de San Francisco, the city's main commercial square. Here, stalls are piled high with everything from Spanish olive oil to exotic luxuries. One merchant sells woolen cloth destined for Northern Europe. Another hawks silk from Asia, which has trickled in through long, complicated trade routes. Spices draw curious noses, and sugar, once a luxury only for nobles, is beginning to sweeten the diets of ordinary townsfolk. Diego stops to chat with acquaintances. A Flemish trader grumbles about delays in Antwerp. A Genoese banker hints at new credit opportunities. Everywhere, deals are being made. Some are sealed with contracts, others with a handshake and a prayer. One striking feature of Seville is its diversity. While Spain is deeply Catholic, this is, after all, the era of the Inquisition. The city is full of foreigners, Italians, Flemings, Portuguese, even a few North Africans, and conversos, Jews who converted to Christianity, work and trade. Their presence adds to the city's richness, but also its tensions. Diego is used to this melting pot. He knows a few words of Italian, enough Portuguese to haggle, and relies on interpreters when needed. Business has its own language, and everyone here speaks it fluently. Profit. As Diego makes his way through the city, he can't ignore the contrast. On one corner, wealthy nobles parade in fine clothes, their carriages rolling past with an air of untouchable privilege. On another, beggars sit with hands outstretched, hoping for coins from merchants or sailors. The influx of silver from the New World has made Spain rich, but not everyone sees that well. Prices are rising, and ordinary people struggle to keep up. Diego himself walks a fine line. He's wealthier than most, but one bad voyage could ruin him. He's seen merchants go from silk cloaks to rags in a matter of months. In Seville, fortune is as unpredictable as the sea. Towering over the city is Seville's cathedral, with its famous bell tower, La Giralda. Merchants like Diego pass it every day, and it serves as a reminder that trade and faith are always intertwined. Before ships set sail, captains and merchants alike attend Mass, praying for safe voyages. Business deals might be made in the shadow of the cathedral, but everyone knows the church has its eyes on them. Diego is no exception. He stops for a brief prayer, asking for protection over a ship he's invested in that should be arriving soon. Faith doesn't guarantee success, but it offers comfort in a world full of uncertainty. By late morning, Seville is buzzing. The docks rumble with activity, the markets roar with haggling, and the narrow streets pulse with life. For Diego, this is both exhilarating and exhausting. The city feeds his ambitions, but also keeps him on edge. Opportunity is everywhere, but so are risks, rivals, taxes, dishonest partners, or a storm that could sink his profits at sea. Still, as Diego looks around at the city he calls home, he feels a surge of pride. Seville is not just any city. It's the center of the world, or at least it feels that way. And for a merchant like him, there's no better place to be. Guild meetings can be tense affairs, full of debates about pricing, imports, and competition, but they're essential. Diego belongs to one such guild. It gives him a network of allies who share information and sometimes pool resources for big ventures. But it also means politics, alliances, rivalries, and the occasional heated argument. In Seville, being a merchant isn't just about selling goods. It's about navigating a web of relationships, favors, and obligations. If the docks are the supply line, the marketplace is where goods change hands. Diego heads to the Plaza de San Francisco, the city's main commercial square. Here, stalls are piled high with everything from Spanish olive oil to exotic luxuries. One merchant sells woolen cloth destined for Northern Europe. Another hawks silk from Asia, which has trickled in through long, complicated trade routes. Spices draw curious noses, and sugar, once a luxury only for nobles, is beginning to sweeten the diets of ordinary townsfolk. Diego stops to chat with acquaintances. A Flemish trader grumbles about delays in Antwerp. A Genoese banker hints at new credit opportunities. Everywhere, deals are being made. Some are sealed with contracts, others with a handshake and a prayer. One striking feature of Seville is its diversity. While Spain is deeply Catholic, this is, after all, the era of the Inquisition. The city is full of foreigners: Italians, Flemings, Portuguese, even a few North Africans and conversos, Jews who converted to Christianity, work and trade. Their presence adds to the city's richness, but also its tensions. Diego is used to this melting pot. He knows a few words of Italian, enough Portuguese to haggle, and relies on interpreters when needed. Business has its own language, and everyone here speaks it fluently. Profit. As Diego makes his way through the city, he can't ignore the contrast. On one corner, wealthy nobles parade in fine clothes, their carriages rolling past with an air of untouchable privilege. On another, beggars sit with hands outstretched, hoping for coins from merchants or sailors. The influx of silver from the New World has made Spain rich, but not everyone sees that wealth. Prices are rising, and ordinary people struggle to keep up. Diego himself walks a fine line. He's wealthier than most, but one bad voyage could ruin him. He's seen merchants go from silk cloaks to rags in a matter of months. In Seville, fortune is as unpredictable as the sea. Towering over the city is Seville's cathedral, with its famous bell tower, La Giralda. Merchants like Diego pass it every day, and it serves as a reminder that trade and faith are always intertwined. Before ships set sail, captains and merchants alike attend Mass, praying for safe voyages. Business deals might be made in the shadow of the cathedral, but everyone knows the church has its eyes on them. Diego is no exception. He stops for a brief prayer, asking for protection over a ship he's invested in that should be arriving soon. Faith doesn't guarantee success, but it offers comfort in a world full of uncertainty. By late morning, Seville is buzzing. The docks rumble with activity, the markets roar with haggling, and the narrow streets pulse with life. For Diego, this is both exhilarating and exhausting. The city feeds his ambitions, but also keeps him on edge. Opportunity is everywhere, but so are risks, rivals, taxes, dishonest partners, or a storm that could sink his profits at sea. Still, as Diego looks around at the city he calls home, he feels a surge of pride. Seville is not just any city. It's the center of the world, or at least it feels that way. And for a merchant like him, there's no better place to be. The morning sun slants through Seville's crooked streets as Diego makes his way toward a familiar tavern near the marketplace. Yes, he's already eaten bread and olive oil at home, but breakfast in 16th century Spain is more of a rolling affair, an excuse not just to eat, but to gather, talk, and most importantly, trade information. For merchants like Diego, the tavern is half cafe, half stock exchange. Step inside, and the air is thick with the smell of wood smoke and roasted chickpeas. The room is dim, with low wooden beams and rough benches, but it's buzzing with life. Merchants, sailors, and clerks are hunched over tables, their voices overlapping like waves crashing on the riverbank. Some drink watered wine, others dip hunks of bread into stews thick with garlic. The clatter of cups and spoons provides a steady percussion under the chatter. Diego finds his usual spot near the window, where he can watch the street while keeping his back to the wall. Old habit. Merchants like to see who's coming and going. Soon enough, a servant sets down a clay cup of warm milk mixed with honey and a small plate of bread with cheese. Nothing fancy, but it will keep him going until the larger midday meal. A couple of fellow merchants slide into the bench beside him. There's Francisco, a plump man with fingers stained from too much ink, and Rodrigo, tall and thin with a beard that always looks 1 week past trimming. Both are friends in the sense that they share gossip freely, but rivals when it comes to bidding on cargo. "Have you heard?" Francisco says before Diego can even swallow his first sip. "A ship from Veracruz was sighted yesterday just past Cadiz. Should be here within days. Diego raises an eyebrow. Veracruz, that means cacao beans, indigo, and maybe sugar. Profitable cargo if it arrives intact. Rumors, Rodrigo snorts. Sailors will say anything after too much wine. Rumors are the lifeblood of these gatherings. Some are true, some half true, and some completely invented by men, hoping to nudge markets one way or another. Sorting fact from fiction is part of a merchant's skill. Between bites of cheese and sips of milk, the talk rolls on. Another merchant boasts of a cousin in Antwerp who claims the wool market is heating up. A sailor at the next table insists pirates have been spotted near the Azores, sending shivers through investors who have money tied up in Atlantic voyages. Someone whispers that the crown is considering a new tax on imported sugar. This is Seville's version of breaking news. There are no newspapers yet, no radio broadcasts. Information travels by word of mouth, through letters carried on ships or shouted across tavern tables. Being in the right place at the right time, like this tavern, is as valuable as owning a warehouse full of goods. Diego doesn't jump at every scrap of gossip. He listens carefully, weighing the reliability of each voice. Francisco is often right, but has a habit of exaggerating. Rodrigo is cautious, but sometimes too cautious. The sailor at the next table, he smells more like wine than seawater, so maybe not the most reliable source. Still, Diego files it all away. A smart merchant doesn't need certainty. He just needs enough of an edge to place his bets wisely. Breakfast is less about filling the stomach and more about filling the mind. Deals can start here over bread and wine. Partnerships are born in these casual chats. Sometimes even rivals decide to pool resources to fund a particularly risky voyage. Diego himself is considering whether to invest in a small share of the rumored Veracruz ship. If it arrives safely, the profit could be good. If not, well, at least he won't be the only one losing sleep. Let's pause for a moment to appreciate what's on the table. Bread is the backbone of every meal, dense and chewy, baked daily in public ovens. Cheese adds protein, sometimes sharp, sometimes creamy. A jug of wine sits nearby, watered down for morning drinking. Nobody wants tipsy merchants signing contracts before noon. Chickpea stews are popular, rich with garlic, onions, and maybe a slice of salted pork if the cook is generous. Food is simple but hearty, the kind of fare that keeps energy up for long hours of bargaining, counting, and carrying ledgers from one office to another. The shared meal itself builds trust. Breaking bread together is more than nourishment. It's part of doing business. Over the clink of cups, stories flow as freely as wine. One man brags about surviving a storm off the Canary Islands. Another tells of seeing parrots as colorful as jewels in the Caribbean. These tales may be exaggerated, but they stoke the imagination. For men stuck in the routines of ledgers and contracts, stories of far-off places add spice to daily life. Diego listens with half a smile. He knows that every story, no matter how tall, carries a grain of truth. Ships do sink, pirates do strike, and sometimes, yes, parrots really are that bright. Before leaving, many merchants cross themselves, muttering a prayer that today's gossip leans more toward truth than fiction. Some quietly make arrangements, pledging a few ducats here, promising support for a voyage there. Deals that look casual over breakfast can turn into contracts by afternoon. Diego finishes his bread, sets down his empty cup, and shakes hands with Francisco and Rodrigo. No promises yet, but ideas are forming. By the time he heads toward the docks, his mind is already juggling numbers, risks, and possibilities. The tavern hums on as Diego steps back into the sunlight. Seville's streets are even busier now. Mule carts creak under barrels of wine, apprentices scurry with messages, and beggars call out for alms. The real work of the day lies ahead, but breakfast has given Diego more than food. It's given him a map of the currents swirling through Seville's merchant world, and in a business where fortune changes as fast as the tide, that information may be more nourishing than bread and cheese ever could be. The streets of Seville grow louder as Diego makes his way toward the river. The further he goes, the heavier the air becomes, not with perfume or bread, but with tar, brine, and sweat. The docks are the city's lungs, inhaling treasures from across the ocean and exhaling them into Europe. For merchants, this is where fortunes are made or broken. The Guadalquivir River glitters under the sun, its surface crowded with sails and masts. Ships lean into the docks like weary travelers, their timbers groaning after long months at sea. Ropes creak as sailors tie knots, barrels roll down planks, and dock workers shout orders in voices roughened by salt air. Everywhere, there's movement. Crates stamped with symbols are unloaded, some holding silver from the mines of Peru, others packed with cacao beans, cochineal dye, or hides. Men argue over measurements, weights, and tariffs. Guards keep watch with sharp eyes. After all, where there's wealth, there's always temptation. Diego pauses to take it all in. For him, this isn't just noise and clutter. It's the rhythm of opportunity. Diego isn't here for sightseeing. He's here for news. Somewhere among the ships lies his own future, tied up in contracts and cargo manifests. He finds Martin, a young apprentice he pays to keep ears open on the docks. Any word? Diego asks. Martin grins. A caravel from Veracruz docked this morning. Rumor is she's carrying indigo dye and sugar, but he lowers his voice. Half the crew sick? Fever, they say. Diego nods grimly. It's always a gamble. Exotic goods fetch high prices, but a ship with 6 sailors can spark fear, even suspicion of plague. That could delay unloading and drive down prices. Still, indigo is valuable, and sugar sells faster than fresh bread. He files the information away. No trip to the docks is complete without talking to the men who actually brave the sea. Diego approaches a sailor he knows, a leathery fellow named Hernando, with a face lined like old parchment. Storms off the Azores. Hernando mutters between drags of cheap wine. We lost 2 ships in the convoy. Sharks feasted well this year. Diego listens carefully. The loss of ships means fewer goods reaching Seville. Fewer goods mean higher prices. Higher prices could mean profit if he plays his cards right. But Hernando isn't done. He leans in closer. And pirates, French ones, bold as you like, took a ship near the Canaries. The risks of Diego's trade are painted plainly in Hernando's weathered eyes. Storms, pirates, disease. Each could erase months of careful planning in an instant. Nearby, clerks from the Casa de Contratación scurry like ants, clutching documents, tallying cargo, and barking at merchants who don't have their paperwork in order. Diego sighs. Every transaction passes under their gaze. Every chest of silver, every bale of wool, every barrel of sugar. The crown's share comes first. The merchants divide what remains. Still, Diego knows the rules of the game. Better to pay your dues and stay in the crown's good graces than risk losing your license to trade at all. Diego strolls past a row of warehouses, pausing to inspect goods. Wool bound for Flanders, olive oil destined for Italy, and crates of cochineal so red they look like they've been painted with fire. He runs his fingers over a bolt of fine silk, its sheen dazzling even in the dusty light. He thinks of Isabel, his wife, who would admire such cloth but never buy it. They both know better than to waste hard-earned profits on vanity. Yet standing there with silk in hand, Diego feels the temptation merchants always face. The line between enjoying wealth and being consumed by it. Before noon, Diego meets 2 fellow traders who suggest pooling resources to purchase part of the Veracruz cargo. Safer to share the risk, one of them says. Diego hesitates. Sharing risk also means sharing reward, but in a world where a single storm could ruin a man, partnership often makes sense. After a moment of thought, he agrees. Hands are shaken, promises made. A contract will be drawn up later, but the deal is already sealed in the eyes of the men who made it. As the sun climbs higher, Diego takes a quiet moment by the riverbank. The water glitters, carrying with it not just ships, but the lifeblood of Spain's empire. He knows that his life, his family's future, and the entire city's prosperity rise and fall with these tides. He is proud, yes, but also humbled. Merchants don't control the sea or the storms or the pirates. They control only their choices: when to invest, when to pull back, when to risk, and when to play it safe. As Diego prepares to head back into the city, his mind buzzing with plans, there's a lesson hidden in his routine. He doesn't know what tomorrow will bring, fortune or loss, calm seas or storms, but he keeps moving forward. That's the heart of being a merchant in the 1500s, and truth be told, it's not so different from living in our own time.